as a nurse, for I have seen many patients die and heard them speak of things that they've seen. I have often thought when she slipped into the coma that God's angels came and grabbed her and guided her. And as she went through the fog and the mist, the passage through life into death, into life eternal, that she was guided by angels, and she could see in the distance, through the fog and the mist, shadowy forms drawing closer. And in those shadowy forms, she saw her angel boys, little Eddie, who had passed at such a young age and caused her motherly heart to grieve, her darling Willie, who was to be her hope in her later years, and her precious Tad. And as she continued to draw closer, the tall, shadowy form of her all in all, Mr. Lincoln, drew ever nearer. The boys called out, "Ma, welcome home." And Mr. Lincoln, I can hear him say, "Mother, what took you so long?" And I can see them joining hands together and going to the throne of God, where Mary was told that she had done good and was a faithful servant and had earned her rest and now belonged to eternity. Memory eternal, sweet Mary, you are never forgotten. And all of us who present you, who read about you, who learn about you, our hope and our prayer is that we do you justice and we keep your story alive. For truly, you were one of the greatest first ladies, and more importantly, one of the greatest example of a wife and mother. Rest in peace, Mary, memory eternal. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Joanne. That was beautiful. Our next speaker will be Pam Vermillion. Pam, if you want to unmute yourself. Nope, you're still muted, my dear.
Hey.
There you go. Oh, nope, you muted it again. You had it for a second. Technology. Let me see if I can do it. Pam Vermillion. Unmute. You tried on your end, dear.
How's that?
There you go. There you go. Got it.
Thank you. I am bad about that.
That's okay.
Well, we all know that Abraham Lincoln, or we all think that he was a great president and a great person. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about why the preparation for his greatness is due in part to his wife, Mary. There are just a few ways in which she influenced his future. As Ruth Randall said, with Mary in his life, he had what was new in his hitherto rather love-starved existence, someone who was interested in every little detail of what happened to him. She was a bright companion who gave him ardent affection and in small ways looked after his well-being. She provided him with a clean, attractive, and comfortable home in which to relax and good, wholesome meals to nourish his body. She economized to stay within her sometimes meager budget, and she acted as a welcoming hostess to his friends and political allies. Mary gave him a family of 4 rambunctious boys that he could delight in, providing much pride, humor, and relaxation. Coming from a cultured background, Mary was able to teach Lincoln many fundamental manners and forms and ceremonies of etiquette that were so rigorous during that Victorian era. Lincoln sometimes suffered night terrors, and it was Mary's job to soothe them out of him. He also was afflicted with depression, we know, and she used her natural cheerfulness to help ease his bouts of depression. Mary was someone to whom he could share his fears, ambitions, and dreams. They shared a love of politics, and she would help him in any way she could. She was a voracious reader, And he had so little time to do everything and read all the books she knew that he needed to read, and he knew he needed to read. So many times she would read relevant books and to give him a synopsis of them afterwards. He once bragged that he had no need to read after Mary gave him a synopsis. It was so thorough. When he was out campaigning or working, Mary would copy out political letters for him and sign them and send them. Anything to help ease his load. She would also read to him from the paper, and they would discuss headlines and exchanging on issues and strategies. When he was gone from home, she clipped articles out of the paper to keep him abreast of the local political gossip. Before giving speeches, he would many times, especially at the very beginning, give them and practice before Mary. Her sharp critiques were very invaluable to him to help him hone his abilities. These were just a few ways in which she helped to shape the man who would, in my opinion and Mary's opinion, be our greatest president. She did all these things out of love and belief in the man she loved, as she called him her tall Kentuckian. Little did she know that she was preparing him for one of the greatest challenges our country would face.
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. That was great.
Good.
All right, now I would like to introduce Joanne Peterson. For those of you who don't know Joanne, she is a professional actress who's been portraying Mary for 10 years, including for the West Virginia Humanities Council. She'll be singing Nearer My God to Thee, which is one of the hymns that was sung at Mary's funeral, and she'll be accompanied on guitar by her husband, Tom.
Just wanted to say a few words first before I sing. I portray 6 women of history currently, and I've been to every one of their birthplaces as well as where their remains are, where they're buried. The first time I attended the wreath laying in Springfield, I was given the honor of taking the wreath and to put it inside the tomb. It was the first time I'd ever been in that tomb. And as I started down the hallway there, it was as though, I don't know if it was all the grief that Mary had experienced or my mourning for Mary, but I was just overcome with the feeling of grief. Mary experienced so much heartache in her life. We know the loss of her sons, her family being divided by the war, so many things that she experienced being talked about unjustly, not given due for all the good things that she had done with her life. And I just want to honor Mary, as we all do, with what we say, with what we do, with how we represent her. And today I know that she is in a great place with her beloved Mr. Lincoln. Nearer, my God, nearer to thee, though it be a cross that raiseth thee, still all my song shall be nearer, my God, to thee, nearer, my God, to thee, nearer to thee. Still let the way steps unto heaven, over the in every angels to beckon me, in the sky. Sun and stars were not upward I fly. Still all my thoughts shall be dear, my God, to thee. Dear, my God, to thee. Dear, to thee.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate you singing. Thank you.
It was an honor.
All right, our next speaker is Sharon Wood.
Thank you, Valerie. Mary Lincoln wrote in a letter to her sister Elizabeth, "In grief, words are poor consolation. Silence and agonizing tears are all that is left the sufferer." Mary could not be comforted and yearned to join her beloved husband and the sons who had preceded her in death. As we remember her life and commemorate her passing on this anniversary day, I would like to read a Bible passage that was most certainly familiar to both her and her beloved Abraham. It is often read at funerals to give comfort to the mourners. I don't know if it was read at Abraham's funeral, but even if it was, Mary was not there to hear it. By all accounts, she was too distraught to take comfort in these words. But on this anniversary of her death, let us who remember Mary Lincoln take comfort in these words from the Book of Wisdom. The souls of the righteous are in the hands of God, and no torment will ever touch them. In the eyes of the foolish, they seem to have died, and their departure was thought to be a disaster, and their going from us to be their destruction. But they are at peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Next, Jeanette Meyer would like to read a poem that she wrote about Mary Lincoln. Jeanette?
To our spatial Mary. Many may have said, Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? We can only muse as we recall Mary. She knew a president would be her beau. When you think of a girl so skilled who loved to learn about every field, why would anyone question such grit, determination, heartbreak, smart? They all showed their bit. The girl turned woman, wife, mother. She knew there could never be another. The love for her husband was renowned, as her husband shared love for his queen's crown. Mary, the proud mother of 4 sons, hosted parties for them just for fun. Thinking of others and trying so hard, a woman on the move, she was a strong guard. It could be daunting, and that's a fact, but whether right or wrong, family had her back. Like a lioness, she protected her den. A threat ruffled her feathers like an old cackly hen. Tragedies striked her down in her prime, as 2 sons and her husband were taken from her. Those were tough times. With ailments, grief, weeping, she was lost. All these things that happened came at great cost. The people's disrespect for her took its toll. With Taddie's death, she lost control. She seemed happy to run away to Europe abroad. Several times she traveled this route, with applaud. Health concerns made her return home. Only in dreams could she now ever roam. Dear Mary, our Mary, tears filled her eyes both days and nights. To honor her death anniversary is our loving rites. At last, dear Mary, you are in peace. At last, dear Mary, your blessings never will cease. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette.
Sweet.
That was nice.
Very nice. Mary Lamphere couldn't be with us. She is having some internet connectivity problems. She's getting a new provider apparently. But she did post something on the Coterie page that I thought I would read. Since I believe Lincoln is our greatest president, naturally it's important to remember his lifetime companion. Perhaps he'd have been a president without Mary, but history will never know. She certainly loved, comforted, and supported him. She made a home for him, cherished their sons, and helped his political career as she could. Presenting Mary has lessened my lifetime reserve with people. I tell family I'm not outgoing or confident without a corset or a hoop. My dressers have said I gained confidence as I fasten the jewelry. Mary has done that for me. Some of that is ever so slowly making me more outgoing without a corset and hoop. Mary has also let me see only a thin veil separates the living from the dead. Because my late mother introduced me to that purple ball gown, I feel very close to my own mom when I present, read, research, or even think about Mary, another blessing she has given me. So in short, Mary has gifted me with confidence, friendliness, a more outgoing personality, and reinforced lifetime remembrances of my parents and every good and positive mentor who factored in my life. And again, that was from Mary Lamphere, so thank you to her for posting that. Is there anyone else, before I ask Donna McCrary to speak, is there anyone else who wanted to say a few words that maybe didn't message me? I'd be glad to have anybody else say a few words, like Darren maybe, or not to put you on the spot, Darren, but.
Darren. Come on, Darren.
We'd like to hear a male perspective, but you know, we don't want to put you on the spot. That's mean
No
of you.
bras this time.
You're on mute, Darren. We can't hear you. There you go.
If you give me about 5 seconds.
Okay, we can do that. I'm also stalling for time because I want it to be 8:15. Well, I don't want it to be 8:15, but
Yeah.
there's something at 8:15, so. Do, 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 do. No, that's the other night, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
These are the lyrics from a musical I started writing a million years ago
Oh.
and have just been re-editing and re-editing. But I based Lincoln's proposal to Mary Todd on a poem by an author, European author named Brainine. And I just used the first line, which was entitled, I Saw Two Clouds This Morning. And I reshaped it, just the first line, and turned it into Lincoln's proposal to Mary Todd. And the lyrics, I saw two clouds this morning, tinged by the rising sun. And in the dawn, they floated on, mingling into one. Calm was their course o'er fields of green, while nothing dared to come between those clouds which floated gently west. I could not help but feel them blessed. Remember the snows that last winter fell, bewitching us tenderly in their spell, glittering flakes becoming one like sugar confections gently spun. Look at those stars in the sky. A gentle picture catches the eye. They've joined together, appearing as one, sparkling in the midnight sun. Though clouds move on across the land, and snows will melt as winters end, stars will fade at the break of dawn, but my love for you will live on and on.
That's pretty.
Very nice. Thank you for sharing that with us, Darren. That was very nice. We appreciate it. And it's good to have a man participate too. All right. Our last speaker is Donna McCrary. And Donna, you think you're going to talk, how long? I mean, because I wanted this to go to 8:15, but if it doesn't, it doesn't.
I can probably make it do that if you want.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Some of it's going to be off the top of my head, but that's okay. One of the things that I wanted to do tonight was to, well, for one, I think there are people here who may not know who I am or may not know me. So I'm Donna. And I started portraying Mary Lincoln in, oh my gosh, 1991, I think it was. But I've always been fascinated with Mary since my childhood. And I've listened to many of you tonight talk about Lincoln and what a great president he was. And yeah, I agree with all of that. But my interest in Mary began when I was 10. And my family always we always took a summer vacation, and we would go someplace really fun, and we would also go someplace educational. So one year we went to Gatlinburg, Tennessee, and we visited the National Wax Museum, or the Wax Museum of American History is what it was called. And there were all these beautiful depictions. You know, there was Blackbeard, and there was the Civil War, and there was the American Revolution and Virginia Dare. But the one that fascinated me the most was the one of the Lincoln assassination. And it fascinated me so that I was allowed, you know, like just a couple of souvenirs, and I bought a postcard of that diorama. And in it, Abraham and Mary are sitting in the booth alone, and John Wilkes Booth is lurking up behind them. And I can remember being 10 years of age and thinking to myself, I wonder if that's really what she wore that night. Which made me go home and go into my school library, and there were only 2 books on Mary. One was Mary Lincoln, Girl of the Bluegrass, and the other one was Love is Eternal, both fiction. But I read both of them, and then as time went on, I've continued to read and read about Mary. And I believe in looking, when you're researching and reading, I believe in looking for the original source. Look at what the person wrote, look at what that person said. And in my quest, I have been encouraged by friends and others, and I've ended up writing, what have I written, Valerie? 5 books on Mary Lincoln and the Todd family. Yeah. And I'm in the process of writing another one, which is a Q&A book. But like I said, I always go back to her letters and to the letters of others. So to explain a little bit of how I felt, how I believe Mary felt most often, and where she turned to for comfort. I look at her letters, and she wrote one to her dear friend Eliza Henry on August the 31st of 1865, and Eliza's husband had just died. She wrote, "We consider that we have lost our best and dearest friend. It has been my ardent wish that Dr. Henry should have received an appointment in Washington." And then we'll skip a little ahead. And she says, "In this great trial," well, she says that they would have been a comfort to one another in our overwhelming sorrow to have you near, In this great trial, it is difficult to be taught resignation. The only comfort that remains to us is the blessed consolation that our beloved ones are rejoicing in their heavenly home, free from all of the earthly trials, and the holy presence of God and his angels are singing the praises of the Redeemer. I long to lay my own weary head down to rest by the side of my darling husband. I pray God to grant me sufficient grace to await his time, for I long to be at rest. Without my idolized husband, I do not wish to remain on earth. So those are Mary's words on how she felt about death. I think it shows her humanity. I think it shows her love for her husband. And it also shows her love and her faith in Christ, in God and in Christ. She believed in heaven. She was a Christian woman. And that's where she got her comfort. If she had comfort, we could say. Valerie, you want me to go ahead and get into the other part now?
Well, I think we can, I think the other part is good after we talk about this, because it's about 10 after, and I think that's close enough.
Okay, I didn't know if you want, okay.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was just going to say that it doesn't matter to me, whatever you want to do.
Well, what I was going to do is say it's just about 8:15. We're a few minutes early, but 8:15 p.m. on July 16th is the time when Mary slipped through the thin veil that separated the living from the loved and lost. So I thought we would take a moment to bow our heads in silence in remembrance of Mary and extinguish our candles.
Hang on. Did you get my note?
Mary once wrote that she wished for no eulogy at her funeral, but I think it is appropriate to mention that of all the things we remember her for, the thing she was most proud of was being the wife of Abraham and mother to their children. And that's how I choose to remember her, as a laughing, loving, happy mama. And I think now I will turn it back over to Donna for the continuation of her remarks. Thank you for letting me interrupt you, Donna.
Okay. When I was speaking earlier, I said that Mary found comfort in her God, and she was raised in the Presbyterian faith, and I was raised in the Presbyterian faith, so I know quite a bit, or I understand quite a bit about what she was taught and where she came from in there. Something I do not have in common with Mary is that Mary came from a large family full of sisters and brothers and half sisters and half brothers, and I'm an only child. So I have always been fascinated by this sibling relationship that she had with her sisters in particular, and mostly the other three that ended up coming to Springfield. I would like to think that there was a very strong, loving relationship between Mary and her sisters, but when we look at her letters, we find that that's not always the truth. And when she wrote to Elizabeth Todd Grimsley, my notes have just disappeared, sorry. I had this happen to me last night, didn't I? My notes disappeared.
You don't need it, you can do it without it.
Yeah, I can. But I wanted to get the exact quote. When she wrote to Elizabeth Todd Grimsley in 1862, she wrote about how Anne, she obviously had a very difficult relationship with Anne, because she referred to Anne as being further removed from Queen Victoria's court. She talked about Anne having a false tongue since childhood. So here they are. So obviously, you know, there was some strain between her and Anne. Mary seemed to be closest to her cousin, Elizabeth Todd Grimsley, than anyone else. And when she wrote about Elizabeth, she wrote, now this is September 29th, 1861, she wrote, "I often regret EPE's little weakness. Since the election, she is the only one of my sisters who's appeared pleased with our advancement." Elizabeth, unfortunately, did not recuperate or not reciprocate those feelings. She wrote to, most people do not realize that Elizabeth was not living in Springfield in the year of 1860, the year that Lincoln was elected. Her son had gone away to school and she went with him and took her youngest daughter, Elizabeth, with her. So during the election, she's nowhere to be seen. She did write letters home to Julia, her daughter, who was married at the time and had already had one child. And she wrote very damaging comments about Lincoln because she never did really like him. And she also wrote that about a newspaper article that, you know, she's thinking about going to Washington for the inauguration, but she believes that Mary can well dispense with her company. But the most awful thing, that the letter that I think shows her feelings the most about Mary, she wrote this one on February 10th, 1861. And she's writing to her daughter, Julia. "I cannot express my surprise at your Aunt Mary's most singular and undignified conduct. It is really mortifying to see that she is making herself so ridiculous in the eyes of the public. She deserves severe condemnation." Now, Mary did not know about this at that time, but I have a feeling that she may have found out because her and Elizabeth Grimsley wrote to one another quite a bit, and they always shared the family gossip. And years later, or not years later, a couple years later, when Elizabeth came back to Washington, Mary did not request Sister Elizabeth. She requested Elizabeth Grimsley to come. It was Lincoln who requested Elizabeth Edwards to come. And during that visit, Mary and Elizabeth had a horrible fight over the daughter, Julia. Mary read a letter, opened a letter, and read it from Julia to her mother, Elizabeth, and Elizabeth became very angry. I have a feeling that a lot of historians crucify Mary for doing that. I think she was justified because she knew that there was some disagreement. But still, Elizabeth was there at times for Mary when she truly needed someone. She didn't have a completely horrible relationship. And for those of you who have siblings, you probably understand that some days are really good and some days are probably really bad. Frances is the one who always remains the biggest mystery. Mary wrote of her, she remains quiet, as always. And Elizabeth had written to Mary saying that Frances often spoke well of Mr. Lincoln's kindness to the family. We do know that Frances, living as close to Mary as she did, that when Mary wasn't feeling well after the birth of one of her children, Frances planted roses in Mary's yard to brighten her days when she would look out in the yard to see, so she would see something beautiful. But Anne is the sister that everyone believes is the one that Mary disliked, fought with the most. She referred to her in a letter to Elizabeth as having a miserable disposition and false tongue, and even wrote, "If Smith succeeds in being a rich man, what advantage will it be to him who, for his gains, with the most unjustly, what advantage will it be to him who has gained it in some cases most unjustly, and with such a woman whom no one respects, whose tongue for so many years has been considered no slander, and as a child and a young girl could not be outdone in falsehood. She is still further removed from Queen Victoria's court." And the letter also contains several other things against Anne. But then when you look at the letters of John Todd Stewart, you find that John Todd Stewart would frequently visit with Anne and C.M. Smith. And who would always be there? Abraham and Mary. So they had a closeness. They visited each other frequently. It has been said that Abraham and Clark Smith walked to work together every day. They would walk to the square. When Anne married, there was Mary was there for her, helping, because Anne married very quickly. It was a situation where the wedding had been called off and Anne was left at the altar. I think that's the story sometimes gets mixed with Mary being left at the altar, but it was actually Anne. Clark Smith was ill and could not come. And so Anne wrote him a letter saying, yeah, after that's sick, I don't want to marry you. I'm going to be a widow. Don't bother to come. And he showed up a couple days later and said, all right, we're going to get married right now. And Mary rose to the occasion and helped her sister have the wedding that she wanted within a few hours. And so the night of Mary's death, after she's gone through all of this turmoil with all of her sisters, and they've had their good days and they've had their bad days, and they've been there for each other and they've not been there for each other, Mary dies in Elizabeth's home. Now, Elizabeth wrote to Emily Todd Helm, a half-sister, whom Mary had loved dearly and who
Little sister.
broke Mary's heart when her husband joined the Confederacy. And because Emily had refused to take the oath of allegiance to the United States when Lincoln said to send her to the White House, Mary was devastated. And when Emily wrote a horrible letter to Lincoln saying, your many balls made us what we are, Mary was heartbroken and she could not forgive that. So from the time of the end of the Civil War until her death, she never read letters that Emily wrote to her. She would return them marked unopened, or marked return to sender, and they would always be unopened. She never forgave her half-sisters who joined the Confederacy. But still, when Mary passed, the family knew they had to tell Emily. On June the 2nd of 1882, Elizabeth wrote of Mary staying at her home, Mary, who is somewhat an invalid, it greatly exaggerates her condition and demands every moment of my time. And the sister who sat with her that night while she died, she's in Elizabeth's home. Frances is there. Anne is there. And the one who sat with her all night was Anne, the one whom everyone thought she disagreed with the most.
Really?
And Anne wrote to Emily on Monday morning, Dear Emily, on July 17th, 1882, she picked up her pen and paper and she wrote to Emily, Dear Emily, Mary Lincoln was dying all day on Sunday and died about 8 o'clock in the evening that day. A day previously, having been struck with paralysis, could not open her eyes. Saturday evening, and could not open her eyes Saturday evening, and could not see out of her eyes, and her tongue very much swollen and perfectly unconscious. She looks very natural. Will be buried on Wednesday. It was very sudden, but she died quietly, breathing on as in a quiet, gentle slumber. I hope you all are well. My love to the family. I'm so stupid as I sat up all night that I cannot write more. Love, Anne.
Thank you, Donna, for that I think it gives us new perspective on the sisters and especially perhaps on Anne. You know, those of you who know me know how I came to the Lincolns. I was introduced to Abraham Lincoln as a child. And I always joke that when I was 4 or 5, I could recite the Gettysburg Address. But I can't do it now because I'm not Abraham. Now I'm Mary. And I don't have to know the Gettysburg Address by heart. But, you know, all of my growing up, I idolized Lincoln. My parents took me to Springfield. I have a copy of the Stephen Laurent Lincoln book that my mother wrote a dedication in when I was 4. So I have loved Lincoln since then. And then when I was in my 20s is when I found Life and Letters. And I read that, and that's what started my interest in Mary. And I love her. As I'm preaching to the choir, I guess, because I know all of you do too. You know, sometimes when I have performed as Mary and then I'm answering questions afterwards as myself, people will tell me, you know, you talk about them like they're your family, or you talk about them like you know them. And I feel like they are my family. It's odd, but I'm sure some of you feel that way too. So, you know, I am sad. Today is the anniversary of our dear Mary's death, but I think we shouldn't focus on the sadness because this is the day that she longed for so many years. This is the day that she was reunited and there were no more goodbyes. And that's what she wanted. So we should celebrate the joy of her being with them instead of the sadness of the world losing her. And just as I said at the beginning, just like Lincoln, now she belongs to the angels. So with that, at this time, Jerry, are you still with us?
Of course.
Great. Would you like to give a final blessing for us?
Yes. The last time you were in Springfield at the Lincoln Tomb, you may have noticed that there is a steel gate at the chamber at the base of the Lincoln Tomb. There are also steel gates at the entrance to the stairways that get up to the second floor, and a large and heavy steel gate and door getting into the tomb area where Mary and Abraham are buried. I often think that St. Peter is at the gates of heaven, checking the book to see who can get in, not who can get out. Abraham and Mary certainly don't want to get out of where they're at now, face to face with the Almighty. But we are faced with the challenge of taking care of one another, being kind to one another, treating one another as we wish to be treated ourselves. And that's the only way we're going to get into the heaven that Mary and Abraham are in. If you agree with me, say amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Jerry. And thank everybody for attending this very much altered memorial service. It's the longest one we've ever had, which is something besides being our first virtual one, but I think it went very well, and I'm very thankful for everybody who attended, very thankful for everybody who participated. Thank you to Joanne Shelby Klein, to Pam Vermillion, to Joanne Peterson and her husband Tom. Thank you to Sharon Wood and Jeanette Meyer. Thank you to Donna McCrary. So thank you, everybody. And next year, I hope we can all be together in Springfield. Those of you who won't be able to travel to Springfield, we're going to try to do something live like this so that you can see what's going on and be with us virtually. But please try to come. We'd love to give, hopefully by then we'll be able to give hugs. Love to give everybody a big hug in person.
Are you still planning on doing it on the weekend as opposed to on the days?
As of now, yes.
Okay. Just
yes, I should mention that previously we've always done it on the actual death day. And we were planning to do it this coming weekend this year until we had to cancel everything. Since we were doing it virtually, we decided to go ahead and do it on the actual death day. But next year, we are planning to do Saturday, Sunday, or is it Friday, Saturday? I have to look at the calendar, but it'll be the weekend. And, you know, obviously down the road, there'll be more information about that. But keep that in mind, it'll be the weekend after Death Day.
Valerie,
Yes,
next year death date falls on the Friday.
so then we're probably doing Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
The July 6th. Yeah, because we would still have death day, and
Yeah,
that's our 20th anniversary.
Oh my.
wow.
Wow.
20
I'm
years.
Great.
I'm not old enough to have a 20th anniversary for this. Yeah, I
right.
always feel old because, yeah, when I first started doing this, my daughter was just going into kindergarten, and she's a 28-year-old woman living on her own in Arizona now. Also, I wanted to mention, we are going to keep doing virtual events with the Coterie throughout the year. Not as many this week.
Yay.
So I'm going to take a little break and maybe take like a 2-day nap after this week. But
Valerie?
probably yes.
I wanted to thank you for all the hard work you've
Oh,
done
yeah. Thank you
put into
so
this.
much.
organizing it and the help from Donna and Donna. It's meant a lot. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. And, you know, obviously it was Donna and me. It wasn't just me.
Thank you.
It takes all three of us to set everything up. But thank you. We appreciate it. And, you know, we do it because we love it. You know, with that's why we do it. I think both Donnas would agree with me on that.
Absolutely.
So, yep. So speaking of loving it, we're planning other events. I believe it'll probably be towards the end of August. We're going to do a book discussion about Mary Lincoln Enigma. And one of the people who wrote an essay in that book for sure will be with us.
Yes,
She's
at
with
least.
us right now.
The other picture.
So that'll be the end, probably the end of August. I don't have a date for that yet, but as soon as I do, I'll post it on the Coterie if you're not tired of seeing me post.
No.
Believe me, I've been spamming Facebook too. Oh my gosh, all the Civil War groups must be so sick of me. And then we have other events planned. I had posted a tentative list on the Facebook page of other events that we have planned, different book discussions, lectures. In December, Donna Daniels is going to give her wonderful lecture about Christmas customs in the 19th century, which is just wonderful and super interesting. In November, Donna McCurry and I are actually going to get together to be in person together, and we're going to do a talk about the Lincoln's marriage.
Cool.
We're not sure if we're going to do it live or if I'm going to videotape it and then post it. We'll decide. She wants me to videotape it, but we'll see. She's smiling like, we'll see.
Oh, it'll be great.
That's what's going on, coming up. Spread the word to anybody you know that might be interested in the Coterie to join us at anybody that'd be interested in any of the events. You know, we're always welcoming people. We love to welcome new people. Like, let's see. Judy is new to the Coterie. So hi, Judy. I know you're on here. You've got a little cannon for your picture, but hi. You're new to us and we're thrilled to have you. Who else? Am I missing anybody else that's new, guys? Mark is new. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us. Kevin, yes, Kevin is new. Hi, Kevin. Thank you for joining us.
See us.
But I'm glad, we're thrilled to have new people, and we're thrilled to have people that are, well, I don't want to say old, because we're not old.
Yes, we are. Some of us are.
But people that
Veterans.
people that we haven't been able to see in a while.
We're
Joanne
veterans.
Peterson and
We're very
Sue-
distant. We're all very distant, and that's wonderful. that
Yeah.
yes, this is
together
great. And
Wherever
it's-
we are.
it's great to see you, Sharon. It's great
Thank
to see you, Susan.
Thank
We
you.
miss you.
There's this
Oh,
little
look
side
at
of
that.
me that is very glad that this happened, because otherwise I would not have been able to join you guys, because I would be
Right.
working at the
Right.
park. So this is kind of nice for me. Otherwise I would have missed it. So.
Oh, right. I mean, you know, you're gonna look for the silver
Gotta look for
lining,
the
I
silver
guess.
lining, yes.
And the silver lining is that it forced us to do something like this where we can have everybody together apart.
Right.
And have our beverages.
Yes. He went to take a shower, but
Brian.